Before we wrap up for this evening, I've talked about our partners today and what an excellent job they've done to help these teams and help us put this program together. I want to bring up the CFO for Red Hat, Charlie Peters. Charlie oversees Red Hat's finance, IT, operations, and investor relations. And over the past 30 years, he had some very interesting experiences with innovation and perspectives to share with us today. So if everybody could give a warm welcome to Charlie Peters, CFO of Red Hat. You're all set? Good. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I also want to thank Citrix for the leadership and innovation and collaboration of bringing Red Hat and HQ Raleigh into this event. It really is helpful to the community. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to change lives. What I want to talk about today is the traits of entrepreneurs. And first of all, I want to commend all of you on the presentations you made. I thought they were excellent. In fact, almost all the traits I'm going to talk about, you exhibited in your presentations. But I want to start first by talking about my wife. So, I've been married for 41 years, and I've known my wife since the 7th grade. So there's advantages and disadvantages of knowing your wife for that long. Because she was in the same class that I was all the way through junior high school and high school. I know, first of all, she was ahead of me in class rank. Her SAT scores were higher than mine. And she went to Duke when I went to the University of Massachusetts. So occasionally she reminds me about that. And when she started her career, she started as a registered nurse. So Michelle, she would have liked to have known you. But she started as a registered nurse, and she eventually wanted to become a nursing instructor before she became a full-time mother of our 4 kids. So you're probably saying, why am I going through all this about my wife? I want to bring home some of the traits of entrepreneurs. And my wife has really good vision. She's very creative and has vision. And she had 2 mega entrepreneurial ideas in her life, which I want to talk about. And actually, there were multiple, but 2 of the better ones. First, Michelle, we're in the same industry you're talking about. Shortly after leaving nursing almost 35 years ago, she identified a gap in nursing care because at that time, nursing care was only provided in hospitals and clinics. And she identified the aging population problem and said, we need to start a home health care business and traveling nurses. Great idea. Fast forward to today, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we didn't make a penny. So the second big idea, it was in the early 1990s, we're sitting together, and she said, we need to develop a technology that would freeze live TV. And I said, that's crazy. You can't freeze live TV. And of course, in 1999, that was launched as TiVo. And then today, everyone's got their own DVR. It's everywhere. It's a billion-dollar product. We didn't make a penny on that one either. So she could clearly spot trends. She had vision. So here's the first lesson. First of all, never advise your spouse on startup ideas. And there may be a corollary. Jeff, I know your wife is there with you, so this one may not apply to you, but the corollary might be don't ever listen to your spouse's advice on your startup ideas. You're never going to be right about it. So I'm going to talk about traits, but I want to start with a question to everybody. What do these companies have in common? Amazon, Google, HP, Dell, Microsoft, and Nest. I won't wait for the answer, but if you actually Google what companies started in a garage, you'll find that all those companies literally started in somebody's garage. And it's if you Google the list, you're going to find a much more extensive and more diverse list of companies. Walt Disney started in a garage. Yankee Candle Company started in a garage. It's very, very interesting. So from very humble beginnings, these mega companies have created whole industries, economies, thousands of jobs worldwide. Just think about here in the triangle, just right here in this area, some of the larger companies, ShareFile, congratulations, you've done a great job. There are bigger guys that were ahead of you. So for example, SAS, Quintiles, Cree, and Red Hat. Those 4 companies today employ more than 8,000 people just right here in the triangle. and they have global operations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Red Hat. I'm going to tie it back to the traits of entrepreneurs. But I got to start by telling you that Red Hat did not start in a garage. We started in a one-bedroom apartment. And so as the story goes, there were basically two founders of Red Hat. One of them was Mark Ewing. And when he had his first 2 or 3 employees, he had them working in the living room of his apartment in Durham. And the problem occurred when they had an overflowing toilet. And they called the landlord to fix that problem. The landlord came in and observed a number of computers in the living room, a bunch of empty Coke cans and discarded Reese's peanut butter cups. So this is not a residence. You need to get out of here. And the rest is history. Bob Young, along with Mark Ewing, founded Red Hat from those very humble beginnings. Their idea was to sell free software. So the ideas I heard today really are outstanding compared to the business model they had about selling free software. In 1999, Red Hat did its IPO and listed on NASDAQ. In 2006, we listed to customers. New York Stock Exchange was one of our larger customers, so of course we moved our listing to the New York Stock Exchange. In 2009, Red Hat was added to the S&P 500 index. And just this year, Forbes magazine listed Red Hat as number 12 in their list of most innovative companies in the world. And so one of the points I want to make is that innovation doesn't necessarily just have to happen in startups. The ideas I had heard were very innovative and great. But if you can create the right culture, like Red Hat has done, like Citrix has done, and others have done, innovation can continue on and create new things all the time. Today, Red Hat employs about 7,000 people. We have more than 80 offices in 37 countries, and we have 1,000 people right here in Raleigh. And the company started with a couple of guys with a big idea, just like you guys, in a one-bedroom apartment right here. And so you can do the same. I would describe myself as a big company guy. Red Hat had about 700 employees and a little bit less than $150 million of revenue when I joined the company. It was just a little bit more than 10 years ago. And it was the smallest company I had ever worked for at the time. And I think that's the reason I was hired. Matthew Zulik, who was the CEO at the time, had identified the need for an important transition. And he needed to change some of the skills and experience of the employees. And many of the employees at the time described me as the adult supervision. But I would say this, at Red Hat, I'm responsible for M&A, and so I deal with entrepreneurs all the time. We've acquired 17 companies in my tenure, 3 just this year. And those are the successful acquisitions. There's lots of other entrepreneurs that we talk to very frequently. And of the 17 companies, 10 of those were domestic and 7 were in various foreign countries. And what I would say is this, regardless of where those entrepreneurs were located, what country they came from, they all have similar traits. And there's the traits the same as I saw you on display today. In fact, many of the terms you use today, you're going to hear me as I talk about these traits. It's an entrepreneurial thing. It crosses international boundaries and borders. Joe Robinson, in the January 10th, 2014 issue of an Entrepreneur, listed 7 traits that he felt were common for entrepreneurs. And so I want to go down through those traits and sort of relate them back to Red Hat, and then see, as I talk about those traits, if you can relate to them as well. The first trait he mentioned was tenacity. And sometimes it's called perseverance. It could be persistence, determination, commitment. It might be just stick-to-itiveness. But you have an idea, you just got to keep pushing and pushing. You got to be able to live with uncertainty and push through obstacles, sometimes for years on end. I realize all these are brand new, sort of out of the box, so maybe it doesn't apply yet. But I heard about multiple entrepreneurs, so you may have already faced this before. But you have to be tenacious. At Red Hat, we often hear the phrase from our open source engineers, fail early, fail often. And that's the way they iterate to constant improvement. You can't get discouraged.
you are going to have disappointments, but be tenacious about it. The second trait is passion. I heard at least 2 or 3 of you talk about passion, and you all sounded passionate in your presentations. So you have to have an excitement and a belief that you can change the world. At least one of you used the term change the world. And that belief gets you through the hard times. When I joined Red Hat, I distinctly remember more than half of the people I interviewed with told me the reason they joined Red Hat is because they wanted to change the world through open source software. And I still hear that at Red Hat today. So that kind of passion is really critical to make your business work. The third trait is a tolerance of ambiguity. So it's the willingness to take risks. You wouldn't be doing this if you weren't willing to take risks. It's the ability to withstand fear, and fear of lots of things. Humiliation, fear of missing a payroll, fear of running out of cash, just the willingness to take on that risk. Every Red Hat office in the world has a quote from Gandhi, the same quote from Gandhi, prominently displayed on the wall. And that quote reads like this: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And I can tell you that quote has inspired people at Red Hat from the very beginning. The fourth trait, which I've already talked about in relation to my wife, is vision. And as I said, entrepreneurs have the ability to see a market before a market is there. You have the ability to identify the need for a product or service before other people even know they need it. And that kind of vision is critical. But as was the case with my wife, it's a necessary element to be an entrepreneur, but it's not sufficient to be successful as an entrepreneur. You need the other pieces to go with it. And in the case of my wife, unfortunately, I was the naysayer. I could have retired 20 years ago, and we followed through on a healthcare idea and had your software and made it work successfully. So when you have a naysayer, it brings me to the fifth trait. You have to have self-confidence. And I'll have to tell you, for a college kid, you had a lot of self-confidence. That was a great delivery you did there, and all the rest of you as well. But self-confidence gets you through these hard times. You're going to have doubts, but you have to always keep pushing and have the self-confidence that you do have a product or service that's going to work, that you have a way to deliver it, that you can find a business model that will actually work. At Red Hat, what we needed for self-confidence was a belief that we could sell free software and that we could convince investors that there was a way to make money selling free software. I think we've been successful on both counts. The sixth trait is flexibility. And I heard multiple of you talk about the word pivot, talk about flexibility. Business survival depends on adaptation. I would be surprised if most of you didn't change at least slightly your initial idea before you get to a successful conclusion. So at Red Hat, the early vision of the founders of Red Hat was to sell magazines about Linux with a free disk in the back. They didn't make much money doing that. In fact, they made almost as much money selling Linux t-shirts and Linux coffee cups as they made on selling the magazines with the disks. So the next iteration was selling a boxed product to hobbyists, sort of in the way that we used to buy Windows when you went to Best Buy. That didn't make much money either. So the real transition point for Red Hat was in 2002. The company came out with an enterprise edition and sold it with a subscription model for software long before it was fashionable to sell software by a subscription model. And of course, the rest is history. This year, we'll have about $1.8 billion in sales, slightly less than that. But they had the ability to adapt and pivot. So be flexible. And of course, the last trait is rule breaking. And as a public company CFO, this is a really tough one for me to talk about. Because when you get to the stage that Red Hat is today, rule breaking is not only not tolerated, but it's dangerous from a public reporting perspective. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, if you don't break rules, you don't get things done. So Entrepreneurs exist to defy conventional wisdom, and you have to exhibit a willingness to cut through red tape, do what it takes to make it happen. It's a combination of smarts and risk-taking that makes entrepreneurs successful. So, in the early days of Red Hat, I would tell you again, early days, this is not what happens today, but the early days of Red Hat, I remember authorizing a skunkworks engineering office up in Massachusetts where they did not yet have the internet installed. But the engineers found a way to sort of hang out the window and borrow the wireless stream coming from the neighbor. I also remember a sales guy in Taiwan not waiting for us to approve the office, so he leased the office with his credit card. Those kind of entrepreneurial things are sort of the norm in a small startup company. When you get to the stage we are today, probably not so much. But you all wouldn't be here today if you couldn't relate to most of these 7 traits. And I hope that you will succeed. So the good news is you have picked a great place to try to start a business. Someone talked about the fact that we have terrific universities here, a great source of young talent. It is the lifeblood of our business. Secondly, we have nice communities, and we have a reasonable cost of living. It's significantly different from the Northeast or Silicon Valley, if that's who you're competing with. It's a great place to attract talent. And then we also have state and local government who understand the importance of business and innovation in creating jobs. And so we have the right climate environment here to do that. And of course, we also just have a beautiful state. From the mountains to the ocean, everything in between, it's a great place to live and work. So you've got a great place to start a business. So let me end with this. The 2 founders of Red Hat were Mark Ewing and Bob Young. They built a successful business selling free software, a task that some said was impossible. Given the interesting ideas and concepts that I heard you all talk about today, I think you too can be successful. You just got to keep going, possibly pivot, change, take the advice of all these people that are trying to help you, and be successful. Stay focused on your vision and pursue it with passion. Avoid the detractors and naysayers. That was me with my wife. But also have the wisdom to know what you don't know and when to seek help. And the self-confidence to be flexible and change course when it's necessary. And you need to grow a great culture and protect it fiercely. Above all, have fun while you're doing it. Thank you very much. Wish you the best.
Great words of wisdom. Thank you, Charlie. So, we're got to the point where you've, I hope, got a sense where these large companies like Citrix and Red Hat can come together with other partners and put a program on like this to help these young companies come along. There's one other partner I want to call out. We just mentioned state and local government. So I mentioned in my earlier presentation that the state of North Carolina did some very innovative things in decades past to really change the nature of education and the ability to earn money here. The city of Raleigh has been a great partner here, and I wanted to announce that they're going to be offering our teams grants. If you're willing to stay in the city of Raleigh, they're willing to help finance that wherever you decide to office going forward. So thank you very much to the city of Raleigh.